Okay, good morning everyone, and to those who have been waiting since 9 o'clock, sorry for the late start. For those who will only come on at 9:30 or only hear this recording because they came on late, sorry for the early start. I'd really like to try today. This will be the last in the series before Yom Tov, so I'd like to just try and really finish off. I can say that about the Moshe Cordovero, the amazing thought of and ideas and insights that he shared. So we really left his best known work till last. And all I will do today really is try and explore this amazing work. I mentioned last week and the week before that he wrote many works, primarily Kabbalistic works. He was an important halachist, but that's not his claim to fame. And as a Kabbalist, even though his work is absolutely vital and essential because it laid the groundwork of the Ariza's revolution, nonetheless, that's also not his claim to fame. It's not what he's known for. If people have heard of him, it's because they've heard, sadly, really, of one work and one work only of his, which is his Tomer Devorah, which means the palm tree of Devorah. And this book became a Mussar classic. So let's just, for a couple of minutes, explore the Mussar revolution and explain at which point in history it became a classic. So first of all, just to contextualize this, we're talking here in many, many years before the Mussar revolution. We're talking about in the 1500s. The so-called Mussar revolution took place in the 1800s, led by Rabbi Yisroel Salanter. So I don't want there to be a sort of anachronism, historical anachronism here. But to contextualize this historically, Torah consists of halacha. It also has philosophy. It has hashkafa, it has a worldview, and it has a sophisticated ethical system. There's ethical behavior, which isn't always covered by halacha, and by definition can't always be covered by halacha, because halacha is legal, and human beings are always ingenious enough to create legal loopholes and behave unethically despite halacha. So no legal system can really ensure proper ethical behavior. So there is an area of halacha or appropriate Jewish behavior called Mussar. Nowadays we call it Mussar. Mussar means ethics. The terminology again is an anachronism. It was really introduced primarily by Rabbi Yisroel Salanter in the 1800s, but that's now what we refer to. It's an ethical system. Now, where is this system classified? And the answer is not really. It's not really classified anywhere for obvious reasons, because in essence, it doesn't lend itself to classification. That's almost the whole point. But we have some Torah shbichsav about it. We have Kedoshim to you, should be Kodesh, for example. And the Ramban there explains that it means beyond the other Tariag mitzvahs, the other 612 mitzvahs, there's the 613th of being holy. There's a parallel to that in sort of into human affairs. Do that which is straight and good. Why do you need the pasuk do that straight and good? I mean, open your Shulchan Aruch and make sure you're not stealing and make sure that you're following all of Dinei Mamonos. And the answer is because again, you can follow the whole of monetary law and still be a thorough scoundrel. So there is allusions to these ideas in Torah Shbichsav. Then in Torah Shebal Peh, the only sort of systematic presentation you have of ethics is Pirkei Avos. And Pirkei Avos really only touches a small area of ethics, and other ethical halachos or ethical points are scattered throughout Shas. They're not really collated anywhere systematically. So every so often there'll be a Gemara which is, for example, discussing Dinei Mamonos, a legal matter of monetary affairs, and the Gemara might finish off and say that's the correct behavior technically and halachically, but or you should do go beyond the letter of the law. The Gemara is very critical of those who are always legalistic in their thinking. There's one version of the Gemara says that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because Hemidi Dinei Mal Din Torah, because everyone established their legal practice in line with Din Torah. In line with, now that's wonderful. They went to constant Dinei Torah. What could be better than that? The answer is you can behave legally and still be missing the point. So as we enter the era of the Rishonim, there hasn't really been systematic collation of ethics. And I suppose one could say that there's 3 or 4 great works that stand out in the era of the Rishonim that systemize ethical views. The first, maybe historically, is the Chovos Halevavos of Rabbeinu Yonah. Chovos Halevavos means duties of the heart. And he frames it explicitly like that. He says, we've got a lot of literature about duties of action, but we have very little about duties of the heart. And therefore, I'm going to write my Chovos HaLevavos. This is Rabbeinu Bechai, very early Rishon. We have the Rambam, of course, in his Mishnah Torah, in which he attempts to collate the whole of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the Rambam's, one of the aspects of the Rambam's greatness is his ability to collate disparate sources. And he takes all the ethical teachings scattered throughout Shas and collates them into his Hilchos Deos. Hilchos Deos is literally translated as, we think of it as dart, as knowledge, but the Rambam by that means something akin to midas, character traits. So he's got a whole section on Hilchot Deot, on character traits. Then there's Rabbeinu Yonah, the great ethicist of Spain, and he has his Shari Teshuvah. I suppose that's the third work that really springs to mind in the era of the Rishonim. There are more, but these are the ones that have become classics. And the fourth is our Devorah. So it hits, if you take till the year 1600, I would say it's the one of the four great works which are of ethical development. Fast forward now another 400 years to the 1800s, Rabbi Yisroel Salanter's revolution, his Mussar revolution, is he says this isn't enough that these books have been written, we need to put them into the curricula. And he says the yeshiva curricula is too limited, yeshivas focus on halacha and lomdos, these are very fine things to do, but we need to set a curricula of Mussar, and he establishes a Mussar system, which uses these great ethical works I've just mentioned, in addition to the Ramchal Luzzatto, who's a couple of 100 years later. So the Cordevero makes it into the canon of great Mussar works, which are introduced into the curricula in the Mussar revolution of Rabbi Yisroel Salanter. Sorry, David, you want to ask something? Or? Sorry, were you waiting to ask something? No, it's fine. Yeah. Okay, so that's the Rabbi Yisroel Salanter's revolution. I hope, Rabbi Yisroel Salanter is my list of great thinkers that I'd like to look at more fully as to why his teachings led to controversy and what was controversial about what seems a very non-controversial perspective. But that's way beyond the scope of our discussion today. All we are looking at is the Devorah, and I'm simply just trying to position its achievement that the Devorah is a work that became one of the greats of the Mussar canon, and as a result is the most well-known of Moshe Cordovero's works. Now, what is the work? So starting with the title, we don't know why he called it Devorah. We have no idea. He wrote a greater work, a larger work, which is called Elima Rabasi, which means which is divided into palms. Each chapter he calls a palm, Toma. So there are those that have a theory that this was designed as one chapter within his greater work. Again, we don't really know why it's called Devorah. The second thing we know is that he hadn't finished writing it. It's certainly a complete work, but first draft, because it's got lots of editing mistakes in it. There's various Gemaras that are quoted that are misascribed here and there. He'll give a wrong reference, or he'll misquote which figure in the Gemara said it. So it wasn't an edited work. And we probably know why. As we said, he died young. His literary estate was sold by his widow and by his son, who was 8 years old when he died. So the work was never entirely completed, but it's pretty much a full work, just with the odd editing problem to it. Okay, what is the nature of this work? What does it do? So I mentioned the couple of psukim that we have in the Torah that directly address ethics. There is an additional pasuk which Chazal pick up on, and this pasuk says, "V'halachta b'drachav," you should walk in the path of Hashem, which Chazal understand to mean we should. It's known in Latin as imitatio Deo. We should imitate God. So we should walk in His paths, meaning we should be God-like in our behavior. So let's look at how Hashem behaves, and we should behave accordingly. Mahu rachum, just like Hashem is merciful, afatahi rachum, so too you should be merciful. Mahu chanun, afatahi chanun, just like Hashem is gracious, so too we should be gracious, and so on and so forth. The Rambam paskins this in his Mishnah Torah, and Rashi cites this in his commentary on the Torah. So this is well used by the poskim. Now, what exactly does this pasuk mean, and what's this idea? By the way, I mentioned earlier the pasuk of kadoshim to you, and that also has an aspect of imitation to it, because it's kadoshim to you, you should be holy. Because I Hashem, I'm holy. So you have the same idea that you should be holy because Hashem is holy. So Rashi understands the Gemara to be primarily talking about actions. In fact, there are two Gemaras. The Gemara comes twice And once the Gemara does emphasize, rather than being X, the Gemara talks about behaving in manner X. So Rashi understands it as about actions. The Rambam understands it as about midas. And by the way, the Rambam's famous Derech HaMamutza, the middle path or the golden mean of the Rambam, he also linked to this pasuk. He said, if you really want to know how to be godlike, behave in a golden mean manner, behave in the middle level. Don't be too selfish, clearly not, but don't be so generous that you're squandering money and being taken advantage of also. Don't be too ambitious and driven and greedy and the like, but don't be too apathetic either, because then you won't achieve everything. You should choose the middle path and so on and so forth. This is the Rambam's golden mean. This is how he understands it. The Devorah really introduces two innovations, and he does so because of his Kabbalistic mindset. And the first thing he says is that imitatio Deo, being godlike, isn't just sort of copying Hashem, but this is the way of drawing close to Hashem. And I just want to expand on this for a few moments. We talk about kivos elokim, being close to God. Now, how are we meant to be close to Hashem? I mean, Hashem doesn't exist geographically. If I say you should become close to me, I mean, stand close to me. Fine, that's a geographic closeness. What does it mean to be close to Hashem when Hashem is aphysical? And the answer is there's a different sort of closeness, which is a conceptual closeness. What sort of conceptual closeness? You can have an emotional closeness, for example. When you say be close to someone or close to someone, you mean I'm emotionally close to someone. The Kabbalim understands it to mean we are like God. So they understand this pasuk of halach to b'drachav or imitatio Deo is not just one mitzvah within a whole family of mitzvahs. It is in a sense the mitzvah above all mitzvahs. And in one way, you could understand the whole of Torah as being ways of achieving a path to becoming godlike or becoming close to Hashem. We are created in the image of Hashem as a potential, but we need to actualize that potential. How do we do so? By becoming godlike, by imitating Hashem. So when we say we are close to Hashem, what we mean is we are capable of behaving in a godlike manner and molding ourselves into something godlike. That's what it means to be close to Hashem conceptually. If Hashem is above time and space, if we think of ourselves as post-death becoming somewhat an immaterial consciousness, our consciousness can be close to Hashem by having a godlike consciousness. So something like that is the first point that the Kabbalim make, and this is emphasized by the Ramchal and others who speak later about this. So this is the first point that the Devorah makes. The second thing he says, which also has Kabbalistic origins to it, and in a moment I'll explain why, is that unlike Rashi, who emphasizes action, and the Rambam, who emphasizes midas, character traits, the Devorah, Moshe Cordovero, starts off with emphasizing will. So if we dig deep into what a human being is, and we ask what's the deepest part of a person, some people might say what really matters is action. What you do counts. Forget your midas, and if you have horrible midas, but you're always doing kind things, or then who cares? You're doing good. We ask ourselves, what's Judaism about? You know, is it action-based, mitzvah day, do good things, right? That's one possible answer. The Rambam understands its intellect, right? It's reason. That's right. Rambam understands it's a separate discussion. The Devorah, Moshe Cordevero, argues it's will. If we dig the deepest of what the depth of a human being is, the answer is it's will. It's what I want ultimately. And the reason it's will is because this ties into Bechira, and Bechira is the most godly aspect we have. In fact, you could say that Bechira is what makes us into a creator. If we talk about being godlike, what is God primarily? God is primarily a free agent who can bring things into existence. Are we human beings free agents who can bring things into existence? In a very limited way, yes. We can't create a world or a universe, but if you can make free choice, and free choice means uncaused, then we are also uncaused causes. So if you think about God as the first cause or the uncaused causer, in some level or other, we are godlike because we also uncaused causes. Now that's the essence of what Bechira is. Bechira is that on some level or other, I'm capable of choosing a will, choosing something, wanting something, willing something, above and beyond any other causation. I don't just will this because of my upbringing or my psyche or because of my experiences. I will it because I'm genuinely choosing. That's what the essence of Bechira means. So I'm being godlike and creating something myself in so doing. So the second point that Devorah makes is that the deepest sense of being godlike is willing, is to have a will. Or to put it the other way around, when we look at God, the most basic thing we can understand about God, if we push to the depth of our ability to conceive of the divine, the first thing we can understand about God is that he has rotzen, he has a will. So the deepest level of understanding the divine is he has will. Everything else is after that. But the first thing we can say is he willed, he had a rotzen, he willed that things should be. Any earlier than that, we can say nothing about God. God is indescribable, he's beyond time and space. However, he chooses to want, and at that point, the conversation starts. Now, in a minute, we'll discuss what is it that he willed, what does he want, but let's just put this into Kabbalistic terminology firstly. And the Mekabalim talk about 10 sephiros, 10 attributes. Attributes is a dangerous word when we're talking about God's 10 emanations, 10 created attributes, 10 ways in which God radiates and broadcasts his existence onto the world. And in the Cordovero system, the first of these attributes is known as Keser, or the crown. And I just want to explain this terminology. By the way, we have this in Kabbalistic prayer texts. For example, in the Hasidic rite for Kedusha of Mussar, they say Keser Yitnu Noch Hashem Elokeinu, a crown they should give you. Now that's a relatively non-controversial statement to make. We should crown God, but the background to this is a very ancient Kabbalistic work. The idea of Hashem having a crown. What do we mean by Hashem having a crown? What's the metaphor behind that? And the answer is as follows: the lower sephiros all are things that we conceive of as present within ourselves. So, for example, Chokmah, Bina, Devorah, Tsefat, and so on. We perceive within the personhood of a human being that we have Chokmah, we have wisdom, we have Bina, we have insight, we have Devorah, which is strength, and therefore, similarly, we ascribe to God these godly attributes of God having wisdom, God having insight, God having strength, and so on, in his own way. The point about a crown is that it rises above the person, it's beyond the person. It's something that precedes almost consciousness or where we think of as the person. So if this is me, do I have an aura? Do I have something above myself? That's the crown. What is it that's above myself? And that is this mysterious rotzen, the will. Because the whole point of Bechira and will is that it emanates from an unknown place. It's an uncaused cause. It can't emanate from reason and thought and things like that, because then it's caused. The whole point of Bechira is that I choose it. So will and rotzen, desire, godly desire, is the metaphor used by the Kabbalists as keser, is a crown, is that I'm connecting myself to that which goes above and beyond personhood, above and beyond our sense of identity. So the next point that the Moshe Cordovero makes is that if we want to imitate God, we need to think about rotzen or will or keser. So that's his next point. Now, writing notes for myself. So that's the next point he makes. Now, what is the first thing we can say about the rotzen of Hashem? What's the highest thought we can, or highest will we can ascribe to him? And the answer to the question, says the Talmud Devorah, is rachamim, is the quality of mercy. In other words, why is that the highest thought? Because God says, I'm going to create a creation, which by definition is going to be limited and flawed. Because if it's not limited and flawed, humans can't become godlike and can't imitate me. And therefore, by definition, I'm going to have mercy on it. So the highest rotzen we can ascribe to God is tolerance of flaws, tolerance of mistakes, maybe something like that, which we call loosely rachamim or mercy. Okay, so now let's step back. What is the Talmud Devorah? Talmud Devorah is a Kabbalistic work which takes the 10 sephiros, the 10 attributes of God, and says we humans have to copy them. Not just God, does God need sephiros, but we humans also need sephiros. We need these 10 mitzvahs. So go and learn Kabbalah. I, the Talmud Devorah Moshe Cordevero, I'm going to simplify for you the Kabbalistic system. And I'm going to tell you what you need to know as non-Kabbalists, because even though you may think, I'm not a Kabbalist, what do I need to know this stuff for? If you really want to imitate God on the highest level, you have to imitate the God as revealed by the Kabbalists. It's not enough to imitate God as revealed by the philosophers, or as revealed by the halachists, or the ethicists even. True ethics is imitating God as revealed by the Kabbalists. And therefore, this is the last, and in terms of popular appeal, the greatest work of the Devorah, of Moshe Cordovero, in which, with his great kindness, he says, I'm going to share with you the Kabbalistic structure of godliness, so that you, people who wish to develop ethically, but don't have the ability or the interest or the time to develop as Kabbalists, are able to draw near to that highest level of godliness. So just to summarize, the Devorah is taking the Kabbalistic understanding of God, the 10 spheres, and out of that he writes a most beautiful ethical work. It's quite amazing, a phenomenally beautiful ethical work in which he parallels the 10 spheres. All we are going to have time to look at today is the first of the 10 spheres, and this is actually the bulk of his book, because he's very interested in the first of the 10 spheres, because this is the deepest and first of them. What is the first of the 10 spheres according to Moshe Cordovero? Keseh, Rotzen, will, which is somehow above all the other spheres, as I just explained. And that parallels Rachamim, and therefore he's going to analyze how we can adopt the qualities of Rachamim, and that's what we're going to look at today.
Does this mean if you get the Rotzen right, your actions will be right?
You'll be well on the way. There can be reasons why Rotzen can be unfulfilled, things can get in the way, but definitely if you don't start with Rotzen, nothing else can follow.
You start off by saying your actions are bad, your will is sort of, so what might I say?
There are different ways, as I said, of conceiving what human godliness means. If a human is a physical being, you could argue that actions are all that matters. The Rambam says, no, a human is a physical being, but more importantly, an intellectual being. So let's look at intellect. The Moshe Cordevero says, a human is a physical being, a human is an intellectual being, but a human is a willing being, is a wanto, is a rotzen being, is a choosing being. And therefore we have to start at the deepest level. Now, of course, it's not good enough to say, my heart is there, I'm sorry, my actions towards that. It has to trickle down into the whole shir koma, into the whole personhood of the person. However, it starts with Rotzen, and then it goes to intellect, and then it goes to action. That's the Moshe Cordovero's point. So you see that Rambam argued on the non-philosophers and said, why are you only talking about action? What about intellect? The Moshe Cordovero as a Kabbalist is saying, and what about Rotzen? That's where we really need to dig deep.
I know thank
Um,
say what you want, say what great wills, but your actions are poor.
It's true that if your actions are poor, it's probably an indicator that your Rotzen isn't there. And therefore you should question what's really going on. Nonetheless, and clearly, if you're doing bad actions, it's not enough just to say your will is there, but nonetheless, you need to start with Rotzen. Okay, so that's the introduction to Devorah. And what we're now going to look at is the section that deals with Rachamim. Before I go further, I want to acknowledge someone gave me a book by someone called Dr. Henry Abramson, who is a historian and seems to be a very, very special person. And he wrote a book on this first section of Devorah, in which he takes this midah of Rachamim and he translates it actually into very live Mussar examples. And some of the way he translates it was helpful for me in sort of thinking how to just translate this into a real a sort of real life Mussar work. But let's talk about what the Devorah says. Okay, so we're at the world of Keseh, Rotzen, and we're in the world of Rachamim because the Devorah and Moshe Cordovero thinks they're the same. And now we are going to move from abstract Kabbalistic ideas into real Mussar. What can we say about Rachamim? What do we know about Rachamim? Okay, this time of year, what do we know about Rachamim, Marcy? We are asking for it. And what psukim do we quote that quote the concepts of mercy? The Yud Gimel Midas. Okay, so there are 13 attributes of mercy. Says Moshe Cordevero, therefore, and this is why I wanted to do this safer at this time of year and wanted to get this last year in before Yom Kippur. We need to analyze the Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim, and we need to adopt them. So if Hashem Kel Lachem B'Chanun, we need to be Hashem Kel Lachem B'Chanun, etc. However, the pasuk that he uses to launch the Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim is not the pasuk of Hashem Kel Lachem B'Chanun, which is has two, from a human point of view, two weaknesses in terms of copying it. Instead, he uses the elaboration of the 13 Midas Rachamim, which is found in Micha. In Micha chapter 7, there are a series of psukim which parallel the 13 principles, 13 Midas Rachamim, according to the Kabbalists, Mikel Chamodchan, Noisa Ovin, Oval Pesha, etc. Now, where do we recognize this pasuk from? Hopefully twice in the last few days. Firstly, in Tashlich, this pasuk features, and secondly, at the end of the Haftorah on Shabbos Shabbat. Okay, So this year was very, very well timed and well designed. It's absolutely the theme of this time of year. Now, why are there two orders of Rachamim? Why do we have two sets of Psukim, Hashem, and the Psukim in Micha? So the Kabbalists again address this point, and they say that Hashem is what they call the Seder Tatar, the lower order of Rachamim, and Micha is the upper order of Rachamim. There's a number of reasons why, which we won't go into, but including on a basic level, that Hashem Kol is said in the context of bakasha, of request. If you look at the Psukim in context, Moshe is turning to Hashem, saying, please behave in this way. And therefore it is a lower level of Rachamim. The higher level of Rachamim is as described by Micha, which is purely Shvach, praise of Hashem. So it's not in the context of personal interest or request, it's just praising Hashem. Okay. So either way, the Cordevero now says we need to analyze these Psukim of Mikel Chamocha, Nos Oven, etc. And if you want to develop yourself as a human, you're going to have to work through, I'm afraid, all 10 spheres. And the first of the 10 spheres has 13 parts to it. So it's not easy developing yourself ethically, but the Cordevero, with his great kindness from Moshe Cordovero, writes us a guidebook how to do it. And as I said, I'd encourage people to read the book. It's an amazing, it doesn't need my encouragement, but it's an amazing sefer in which he does this. So all we are going to do is I'm just going to try and pick a few highlights of the Cordevero of these midas, and with that we will finish our series. So I picked here the first three and the sixth to focus on. So let's just go through them one by one. Mikel Chamocha, who is God? Who is God like you? There's something which is abnormal and remarkable about Hashem. And here the Cordevero introduces a angelic praise, which he says the Malachim give to Hashem, in which they describe Hashem as Melech Ne'elav, a shamed or embarrassed king. What does it mean to say that Hashem is an embarrassed or shamed king? Hashem is a king who takes shame. He takes the punch on the face. He takes the shame on the face. And he says, based on Kabbalistic sources, that the Malachim, the angels, praise Hashem with this title of, what an amazing king you are. You are a Melech Ne'elav. You're an embarrassed or shamed king. What does it mean to be an embarrassed or shamed king? Because we human beings take Hashem's kindness and we throw it back in his face. We abuse his kindness. Now, I want to mention when we're dealing with this, that we're dealing with Rachamim. We are going to be talking about extraordinary levels of mercy and forgiveness. That's what this section of the Cordevero is about. It is clear that there are cases where forgiveness and mercy and tolerance of abuse is not appropriate. And Cordevero discusses that when he talks about another sphere of Hashem, which is Devorah, which is din. Sometimes Hashem does impose justice. So nothing I'm saying here is meant to be definitive. Then every single case in every single relationship, this is appropriate. However, there is a midah that we need to adopt, which the Cordevero argues for, of extreme forgiveness and extreme mercy and extreme tolerance of others. If you think this is moving over to a point of abuse or damage and so on, it could be there's a midah of Devorah to adopt in which you need to set boundaries. I'm not saying that this is an exhaustive handbook of how to treat human beings, but certainly there's a lot of the time in which we soften ourselves and we could be more forgiving or merciful. And that's what the Cordevero is telling us. There's a need to work on this quality of Rachamim. And the first midah that he highlights is Melech Ne'elav, the ability to let the very kindness and givingness that you're doing be used to be abused and used against you. An extreme example of this is obviously a child, where you sustain the child, you look after the child, you feed the child, and then maybe they use their strength to little kids, a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, they use that strength to get angry with you. So Hashem is analogous to that situation. After all, Hashem is the life force of the universe. So where is God found when we're doing an Aveira? Sustaining us, feeding us, energizing us. Wow, that's a remarkable idea. This is the Melech Ne'elav. This is Mikel Chamocha. This is remarkable. At the very moment when we are doing a sin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that's giving us the life force and the energy to do it. Says the Cordevero, we humans, if we wish to be godlike, have to also have the ability to sustain even those who are misbehaving, who are harming us. Within limits, yes.
But we don't feel that we are led on the path that we want to go.
Hashem allows us, he gives us the gift of Bechira, even when we're going to abuse and misuse it. I shall stop here and say this is the first of the 13 levels of Rachamim. He gets higher and higher and higher. This is just the first of the 13. So this is a very, very high standard. Now, again, I don't want to pretend life is simple and that this is always appropriate 100% of the time, but it's a mindset that we should adopt. Certainly in a case where we realize that the person who is misbehaving deserves rachamim. They are a victim in the sense of their own problems, their own limitations, not necessarily because of fault, or maybe sometimes because of fault. The 2-year-old who's throwing the temper tantrum, the teenager who's throwing the temper tantrum, right? So this is Mikel Chamocha Melech Nelach. What powerful words, right? What an unusual title to give to Hashem, the embarrassed king or the shamed king, the king who is very kingliness, his very malchus is being used against him. Then he says there's Nosei Oven. That's the next. We're going in the order of the psukim. Mikel Chamocha Nosei Oven, who carries sin. And this is a very, very interesting, interesting concept, and one that is discussed actually in pedagogy quite a lot. And I'll just try and explain to you. He says that every time we do an Aveira, the Aveira leaves an impact. It leaves in a mystical way, you could say, spiritual energy. In a psychological way, you could say it leaves a psychological damage and harm. In a spiritual realm, you could say it leaves a force for evil. Every time we do an Aveira, it wears us down. It weighs on us. You can think of this as an addiction, right? If you get yourself into addictive habit, we were speaking about coffee earlier, and the problems with reliance on caffeine. Every time you lose your temper, you've made yourself a slightly angrier person. You're now carrying more. Every time you engage in selfishness, you've made yourself a more selfish person. In fact, ironically, it's harder now to escape the original failure than it was before, because you've damaged yourself through so doing. One of the secrets of addiction therapy is actually around this, in which one's tempted to say, I'll just have one more and then I'll stop. But the whole point is the one more is actually making it harder to stop, not easier to stop, because you're now you've yet again sort of fed those neuro pathways of habit and addiction and so on. Okay, so this is, you carry sin. We all carry sin every time we sin. Now we look at the pasuk and it says, who carries sin? Nosei Oven, who carries sin? We're praising Hashem. Mikel Chamocha Nosei Oven. Hashem carries the sin. So this is the second level of rachamim, in which you carry the sin for the person. You carry the sin for them. You partake, not just as in the first level of the life-sustaining force. You continue to feed your toddler or your teenager. But I'm extending this not just to the toddler and the teenager, to every person we encounter, our spouses, our adult children, our parents, our siblings, our colleagues. You have someone who really abuses your kindness. You're a boss and they're an employee, and you continue to employ them even though they sometimes abuse again, within limits. They're not bankrupting the firm or robbing you silly, that you continue to look after the person. Nosei Oven is you even take upon yourself responsibility to bear some of their failure. You try to help the psychological weight of the sin not drag them down, and sometimes within appropriate limits, you even facilitate their failure. You need to even dig deep and go into that zone. This is discussed in pedagogy. I'll give extreme examples of this, and again, I don't mean to simplify things which are very, very complicated and need to be done with care. The analogy of this in an external world is perhaps, when a government decides to hand out clean syringes in order that people who are illegally addicted at least should limit their damage. The analogy of this in parenting and in teaching is sometimes it's appropriate to give one's child a lift to a place where they're going to do something which is really against what you think is appropriate, because the child needs to know there's love there, there's unconditional love there, and you recognize at this point the child is not going to stop doing what they're doing, so at least I'll make it as safe as possible for them, or at least I'll be part of their journey within that. Now, I recognize there's fine lines within this and not facilitating, not becoming complicit in failure and enabling failure and so on, but this is the concept of Nosei Oven, or psychologically bearing some of the weight of the person who's done this. We'll see how this goes even higher, but again, such an amazing reading of a pasuk, and once you hear it so obvious from the great Moshe Cordovero, the pasuk says, Nosei Oven, he carries sin. Who carries sin? We carry sin. Hashem carries sin. The answer is Hashem participates in not just giving us the strength to exist, which is level one, but even giving us the strength to carry the sin so that we're not weighed down by the psychological failure and can't emerge from this. Sometimes if you leave someone feeling so awful about their failure, that itself feeds the failure and they can't break out of it. If you can alleviate, take some of the failure on your own shoulders, you can lift the person and facilitate it. Then he moves on to the third of the levels of forgiveness. But then I want to emphasize this is a Mussar work. He's telling us that we need to apply this in our interactions with people. So we need to take people that bother us. And we all have people that bother us, right? And let's be honest, it's all the people that we love and many beyond. His siblings and his colleagues and his friends and his spouses and his children's parents, all the people that really bother us. And we need to ask ourselves, how can I continue Mikel Chamecha? How can I be a Melech Nerlov, continue to sustain them? Number one, how can I be Nosei Oven? How can I even carry their sin? Again, it can go too far. It can be a case where you're carrying someone's sin and you're taking responsibility from them. I don't mean any of that, but in an appropriate, boundaried way. Then there's the third one, Oval Pasha. Oval Pasha means he passes over Pasha, over crime, if you like, or sinfulness or evil. And here he uses the analogy, an amazing analogy. And forgive me for the language, but this is what he says. He says it's like wiping up after someone dirties themselves. It's like changing a child's nappy. It's Hashem cleaning up for the sin that we do. Over al Pasha, Hashem cleans up. What does this mean in terms of human relationships? It's where you help someone tidy up the mess they've made. You help someone. You make it easy for someone to come back and clean up. What does this mean? It means when someone's been really insulting to you and you go to meet them, you go to reach them, you don't spell out the depth of hurt that they've caused. You take upon yourself some of the pain in order to make it easier for them to repair. Again, phenomenal levels of forgiveness that he's talking about, and he means this in the world of action. We're running out of time, so I just want to mention the final one. This is level number 6. And level number 6 is a very, very useful one and very important. In this we're jumping forward in the pasuk. He chofetz chesedu. He desires, he loves kindness. And very briefly, Moshe Cordovero here gives a very practical tip, in which he says that sometimes looking out for the kindness and goodness in someone who really profoundly bothers you is a very good way to reach forgiveness and reconnection with someone. So again, it's digging deep to see the point of good in someone. So you have someone who really bothers you. And I don't mean here an evil criminal. I mean again, those who are near and dear to us. But there's something that really profoundly bothers us about them. Dig deep and try and find the kindness within them. Try and find the goodness within them. Try and remind yourself every time you're upset with them of the nice thing that they do for you. Right, the positive thing they do for you, the good thing they do for you, the areas of kindness. No one who is either close or far to us, it can be a professional relationship, doesn't do any good for us. Try and look really, really deeply. Chofetz chesed, seek out the chesed, the goodness, the kindness within people, and that can then help you keep a thin cord of connection in which what could be otherwise a relationship which has challenges to it, and see that kindness and use that to connect to the person. Okay, we've reached our time limit, I'm afraid, so we will have to stop here for today. I'll simply conclude by saying that Cordevero is available on Sefaria, and it's in English and it's in Hebrew, and I don't want to leave Moshe Cordevero as a subject by simply saying, well, his Kabbalistic works are very, very niche and very specialist, and this is his Mussar work, and if one reads it with care, it's very, very important. Yisroel Salanter encouraged everyone to read it in Ellul and Tishri, so this is the time of year, and with that we conclude looking at the life and times of and thoughts of Moshe Cordevero. And after Sukkot, we'll start a new thinker, which everyone and I should say, I promised the lay leadership. We are not doing a Kol Nidre appeal on Yom Kippur night this year, due to I mentioned this at the end of my Shabbat Shuvah, also due to the both the growth of the community and also the logistics of minyanim and giving out cards and so on. So I've been asked after every share that I give to please make an appropriate Kol Nidre appeal, which I'm now doing. We do need everyone's support. There is a link on our website to the donation page. Please look at it and use it. I don't need to say what the Kahila provides, and we need really everyone, both those online who are listening to the recording and those who are live here, please to help with this. In fact, I'll post a link for those who listen to the recording of the donation link. So please do help us and help us keep running the shul in an appropriate way. R Shlomo Alkabetz,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.